secret to you.
My ego waffles. I ain't trying to be aggressive, but people look at me like I'm an old man. I came back from resurrecting. They look at me like I came back from the dead, like it's Resident Evil. But they don't even understand that I'm actually more human than you ever can. This is why I'm what you call the ex-human. I'm just different. I'm artistically different. Archvies of Chaos. This is your King and I, Vince of Time EX Turk, and I'm meant to record this on the PC because tonight I don't have my PlayStation 4, so I'm not gonna be doing this through Share Factory, unfortunately. So I have no choice but to use my PC for this. Now, I'm gonna talk about why I thought Garland was a perfect villain, but also the fact that there's a reason why the soundtrack is called Master of Time. Now, if Final Fantasy 1 is connected to 9, which I still think is, so I'm going to go with that headcanon. So anyone who wants to argue and be a naysayer, you could say whatever you want, but you're not going to change my mind. So, to start off, I think Garland, the Garland we see in 9, is actually the future Garland in the Final Fantasy 1 timeline. The one Garland that never turned into chaos. As you see, the Archfiends of Chaos are still alive in Final Fantasy IX. The future variant did not turn into chaos. In fact, the Archfiends of Chaos got defeated separately in Final Fantasy I. And to start off, when Garland was in Final Fantasy I, when he turned bad and turned to evil because he loves war so much, and became the ultimate warmonger, was that age at least in his 30s. And the reason I say in his 30s is it would have to be at that time when the new warriors rise up. You know, Garland was an orphan to the king and Cornelia, at least in the original Final Fantasy I, who turned to evil, started wearing armor that looked like a demon because that's the way Garland views himself. A demon of war. The ultimate chaos. He even turns into the chaos in the original Final Fantasy I. But this is the one Garland that did not turn to chaos. This is the Garland who probably had future foresight, and instead he waited and waited and waited. And waited. Saw everything that happened to the present Garland that didn't turn into chaos, saw chaos get defeated. So instead he waited and waited until the original Warriors of Light died out from old age. And then so many years has passed, a millennium has passed, considering now we got Old Man Garland. And Old Man Garland is pretty much, Old Man Garland is pretty much the future version of is the evolved version of the original future Garland. And that's why he's old. So he waited for a long time. And he's even sprouted some even stronger and powerful armor than he's ever had as the original future Garland. And if you're not keeping up with me, I don't blame you. Time travel is a mindfuck. All you had to do is one of the Garlands never turned to chaos. In fact, waited to enact the final plan. Pandemonium. And that's where the genomes come into play. Old Man Garland is an old man now wearing new armor. The only thing he's not wearing a helm. So you see, and also the fact that you see Garland with a human face as Old Man Garland. So this has to be the one that didn't turn to chaos, because the one that turned to chaos turned into a demon. That's why in Dissidia, one of the alternate skin is that one concept art thing, because that's the original Garland that turned to a full-fledged demon. This one stayed human because he was smarter. The demon would take over and pretty much, turn him into the brute he was in the original. This Garland, however, is a smart tactician. He can still use dark powers like he does, and in fact, he could even surpass the original Garland. He's actually surpassed the original version of himself in this regard. He's actually more powerful than the original version was. Even as, even as the form of chaos. That's why they didn't include a DLC variant of Final Fantasy IX Garland onto Final Fantasy I skin. Now, it could be argued that it could be an incarnation, but if Final Fantasy I goes into Final Fantasy IX, this will be perfect, like I said before. This will make the tie-in perfectly, considering Garland makes sense why Garland's an old man. Now, let's talk about his plans. This is where he creates the genome race, using biological things and fusing it with village people that he kidnaps and lock them in the city of Terra and only send two of them out to the world. Well, thus Kuja actually really saved Zidane because he threw Zidane into another world, even though he was jealous at Zidane. Because Garland liked him better than Kuja. But, he threw Zidane out of the way so Garland wouldn't even know. That's why he threw Zidane somewhere else so Garland wouldn't know. But this would take the genomes, and then he would enact his plan through Kuja. Then, and those would be at least 5 years after, Zidane's been abandoned and Zidane has found his pirate crew, his sky pirate crew. So this one involved the other creation, Kuja. He gave Kuja the wyvern he has, the power he has, even the power to control Eidolons, which are summons. And in this case, Queen Barnay, being greedy as she is, she wants to rule the entire, continent. She would go to him for some weaponry and pretty much instead of like a drug dealer, a weapons dealer. Kuja becomes a weapons dealer for Queen Barnay and gets Queen Barnay killed. In fact, he kills Queen Barnay straight up. So through Kuja, Garland, through Kuja, enacted one of his plans, and that was to start an entire war with each other until full pandemonium is active. So all the events of Final Fantasy IX were affected heavily by Garland. So taking one of the strongest, most narcissistic, dangerous genome he has, Kuja. He acted his plan through Kuja. Then once Queen Barnay was killed off, Kuja was no longer needed by Garland. And that's why Garland says too much racket has happened. Made an excuse to say, Kuja was causing too much racket. So he ends up trying to kill off Kuja but controls Zidane. But he finds out that fails. So, even though Zidane get depressed and wanted to just end his life after figuring out what he really is and why he has a short lifespan after his friends snapped him out of it, they fought Garland, but Kuja actually got his revenge for being, a capture of Garland, because Kuja was forced by Garland to do everything. Garland was a terrible surrogate father to Kuja and Zidane. So I was glad Kuja got his revenge, but then the final battle with Kuja and Zidane was actually what Garland actually needed, because now pandemonium is active, or should I say, the final plot of Garland's plan. Necron is pandemonium. Necron is the alternate chaos, without becoming chaos itself, with enough wars and bloodshed and destruction. And that's exactly what Garland was planning, to summon Necron. Even said so in some of the things you read inside the city of Terra, and some of those tablets you read, that you read in Garland's palace. Garland wanted to enact pandemonium and cause an eternal war. And he was actually hoping to live because he was actually going to absorb Necron and become chaos, the alternate chaos. And this is why I think this is a good fan theory. But most of all, how long has Garland has planned this? Millions of years. Now, before you say, but how could he live if he was human? Remember, this Garland probably practiced some dark magic ritual to make himself live for a long time. You know? I mean, it's not entirely possible for a Final Fantasy character not to live almost forever. Remember, Arden has lived for 3,000 years. You know? Vincent Valentine has lived for technically 56. Just stays at the age of 27. You know, Caius has lived for a long time, at least 500 years. You know, it's not impossible for characters to live for a long time. Even Snowvillius from Final Fantasy 13 has lived for 500 years if you count Lightning's Return. So, you know, it's not impossible. That's what I'm saying. It cannot be impossible. I think it's possible that Garland has done something to his body and his physiology before he created the genomes that made him live pretty much almost for an eternity to do this. So, if I could guess, it'd be like at least 2 billion years. So, maybe Garland has to be even older than even Arden is. I would have to go as far as to say that Garland from the Final Fantasy IX world is actually the oldest character ever. He's been around since the Cornelius and the Warriors of Light, you know, the Warriors of Light and the Crystal days, all the way up to this era, plotting and planning to summon Pandemonium. So this is why I think that it's also possible that Garland is actually the perfect villain. He's actually carried his destruction over 2 games. Not just 2 games, if you count Dissidia. He was actually is the one who planned the original Garland, which is Chaos, actually planned the Dissidia war against Cosmos. So it's in 3 games. In 3 games, Garland has fucked the world over with his plans. So he's planned for a long time. He's had a whole bunch of years of his life to plan all this shit. And he has. He has done good at doing this. So I'd have to say at least one of the abilities, whether it's 1 billion, 2 billion, or 3 billion, Garland has lived for a long time. The future Garland has enacted the plan, the final plan, using Necron, which is Pandemonium. So that's why he had Kuja start the wars and maybe become an arms dealer for a greedy queen. Because Garland was watching that world too. Garland was watching what the world has become those years. Stay hidden and back in the city of Terra, but use that big eye thing, not only to control Idolus, but to watch the world. To watch all over the world, to make sure that the gears are in place for the final act. No matter how many sacrifices he used. Just like I said about Garland playing people, Garland has played the entire world in that series. The entire world. It even goes as far as it's even known in the Dissidia trilogy of what he's done. That's how bad Garland truly is. That many years to do all this. And that's why I think Garland is the perfect master of time. So may the crystal be with you, and this is only a fan theory, so don't, take it with the greatest salt.